The smell of cheap whiskey and desperation hung thick in the Red Dog Saloon when Sophia Kendrick realized her father had just gambled away the last thing he owned her. She stood frozen behind the bar where she had been wiping down glasses, her hands trembling as she watched James Kendrick slump over the poker table, his bloodshot eyes unable to meet hers. The saloon owner, a thick-necked man named Dutch Malone, was already moving around the table toward her, his smile revealing gaps where teeth should have been. It was March of 1882 in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and the frontier town was still rough enough that a man's debts could be settled in ways that made her stomach turn. "Well now, looks like you are working for me now, darling," Dutch said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Your daddy here owes me near about $300. That is a lot of whiskey to drink through." Sophia's throat tightened. She had known her father's drinking was bad, had watched him deteriorate over the 2 years since her mother died of fever, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. "Papa," she whispered, but he would not look at her. "I will give you until tomorrow morning to get your things together," Dutch continued, reaching out to touch her arm. She jerked away instinctively. "You will be serving drinks, entertaining customers. We will work off that debt real nice and slow." The way he said entertaining made her skin crawl. She was 20 years old, and she understood exactly what kind of work Dutch Malone expected from the women in his employ. The doves who worked upstairs had hollow eyes and bruises they tried to hide with powder. "There has to be another way," Sophia said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I can clean, I can cook. You will do what I tell you to do," Dutch interrupted, his smile fading. "Your daddy signed a paper. It is all legal and proper." The saloon doors swung open, letting in a blast of cool night air and a tall figure that immediately commanded attention. The man who entered was broad-shouldered and moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable with violence. He wore a dark coat dusted with trail dirt, and a well-maintained Colt sat on his hip. His hat shadowed his face, but Sophia could see a strong jaw and eyes that took in the entire room in one sweep. "Evening, Dutch," the man said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the tension. "Heard you might have a game going." "Grant Bartlett," Dutch said, and Sophia heard something new in the saloon owner's voice: wariness, maybe even respect. "Did not expect to see you back in Muskogee. Thought you were driving cattle up to Kansas. Finished the drive early, got paid well." Grant moved to the bar, his eyes sliding over Sophia with neither the lecherous interest of most men nor complete indifference. It was an assessing look, like he was seeing her as a person rather than an object. "Whiskey, if you have anything that will not kill me." Sophia's hands shook as she poured, sloshing a bit over the rim. Grant did not comment, just nodded his thanks and turned to survey the saloon. His gaze landed on her father, still slumped at the poker table, and then moved to Dutch. "So what is the situation here?" Grant asked. "Felt like I walked into a funeral when I came through those doors." Dutch's chest puffed out. "Just settling some business. Kendrick here ran up a tab he cannot pay, so we worked out an arrangement." Grant's eyes narrowed. "What kind of arrangement?" "His daughter is going to work for me until the debt is paid, all proper and legal." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grant set his glass down on the bar with deliberate care. "The girl behind the bar, that is right. Pretty thing, is she not? She will be good for business." Sophia found herself holding her breath as Grant studied her again, his expression unreadable. She saw something flicker in his eyes, anger, maybe, or disgust. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "How much does Kendrick owe?" $300. Ran up the tab over 6 months. "I've been patient, but a man has to eat." Grant pulled out a leather pouch from inside his coat and counted out bills onto the bar. Sophia's eyes widened as the stack grew. $300 was more money than she had seen in her entire life. "There is your 300, Grant said. "The girl's debt is paid." Dutch's face flushed red. "Now hold on just a minute, I got rights here. We had an agreement." "You got your money. That means there is no debt, which means there is no agreement." Grant's hand rested casually near his gun, and the gesture was not lost on anyone in the room. "Or are you saying you would rather have the girl than the cash? Because that starts to sound like something else entirely, and I know the territorial marshal might be interested in that conversation." The threat hung in the air. Dutch's jaw worked as he stared at the money, then at Grant, then at Sophia. Finally, he snatched up the bills and shoved them in his pocket. "Fine. The debt is paid, but you and your daddy are not welcome in my establishment anymore," he said, pointing at Sophia. "I think that is a blessing rather than a punishment," Grant said dryly. He turned to Sophia's father, who had finally raised his head to stare at the exchange with bleary confusion. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Kendrick. What kind of man sells his own daughter?" James Kendrick's face crumpled, but he said nothing. Grant made a sound of disgust and looked back at Sophia. "You got somewhere safe to go tonight?" She nodded slowly, still trying to process what had just happened. "We have a room at the boarding house on 3rd Street, Mrs. Patterson's place." "Good. Go there now. Lock your door." Grant picked up his glass and finished his whiskey in one swallow. "And you might want to find somewhere else to live. Your daddy's not going to stop drinking, and next time you might not get lucky." He walked past her toward the stairs that led to the rooms Dutch rented out above the saloon, apparently done with the entire situation. Sophia stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling. A stranger had just paid $300 to free her from an arrangement that would have destroyed her life, and now he was walking away like it was nothing. "Wait," she called out, surprised by her own voice. Grant paused on the 3rd step and looked back at her. "Why did you do that?" His expression softened slightly. "Because it was the right thing to do. Now go home, miss. It is late." Sophia grabbed her shawl from the hook behind the bar and moved quickly to the door, not trusting Dutch's acquiescence to last. Her father did not try to follow her or speak to her, which was probably for the best. She was not sure what she would say to him right now. The cool March air hit her face as she stepped outside, and she realized she was crying. The walk to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house took 10 minutes, and Sophia spent every second of it trying to understand what had just happened, and what it meant. Grant Bartlett had bought her freedom with the same casual ease that another man might buy a round of drinks. $300. That was 6 months' wages for a working man, maybe more. Why would he do that for a stranger? Mrs. Patterson was sitting in the front parlor when Sophia came in, working on her needlepoint by lamplight. The older woman looked up with concern when she saw Sophia's face. "Dear child, what has happened?" Sophia told her everything, the words tumbling out in a rush. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew darker with each sentence, and by the end she was on her feet, her needlepoint forgotten. "That Dutch Malone should be run out of town on a rail," she said hotly. "And your father, I am sorry, Sophia, but James Kendrick is a disgrace." "I know," Sophia whispered. "But what do I do now? I cannot stay with him. I cannot trust him not to do something like this again." Mrs. Patterson pursed her lips, thinking, "You are a good worker, smart and honest. You could find employment. I know the general store is looking for someone to help with inventory and bookkeeping. The pay is not much, but it would be respectable work." "But Papa, your father is a grown man who has made his choices. You are not responsible for him anymore, Sophia." "That man proved that tonight when he tried to sell you to pay for his whiskey." Mrs. Patterson's voice was firm but not unkind. You have to think of yourself now." Sophia nodded, even though the thought of abandoning her father made her feel guilty. But Mrs. Patterson was right. James Kendrick had crossed a line tonight that could not be uncrossed. She went upstairs to the small room she shared with her father, relieved to find it empty. He was probably still at the saloon, drinking away the shame with whatever credit he could beg from someone else. She lay awake most of the night, thinking about Grant Bartlett and his casual act of heroism. She knew nothing about him except that he drove cattle and had enough money to throw around $300 like it was nothing, and that he had a strong sense of right and wrong that compelled him to help a stranger in trouble. The next morning, Sophia went to the general store and spoke to Mr. Hendricks about the position. He was a kind man in his 50s, balding and bespectacled, and he seemed relieved to have someone literate who could help him organize his chaotic inventory system. They agreed on a wage of $12 a month plus room and board in the small apartment above the store. It was not much, but it was honest work and it was hers. She moved her few possessions that same day, leaving a note for her father that she did not expect him to read or care about. Mrs. Patterson helped her carry her trunk up the narrow stairs to the apartment, which consisted of a single room with a bed, a small stove, a table, and a chair. There was a window that looked out over the main street of Muskogee, and Sophia stood there for a long time, watching the people go about their business below. 3 days passed before she saw Grant Bartlett again. She was helping Mr. Hendricks stock shelves when the cowboy walked in, his hat in his hands, looking slightly uncomfortable in the civilized confines of the general store. Mr. Hendricks greeted him warmly, and they discussed supplies Grant needed to restock before heading out on another cattle drive. Sophia tried to focus on her work, but she was intensely aware of Grant's presence. When he came to the counter to pay, their eyes met, and she saw recognition flicker across his face. "Miss Kendrick," he said, nodding politely. "Glad to see you are doing well." "Thanks to you," she said quietly, very aware that Mr. Hendricks was listening. "I never properly thanked you for what you did." Grant shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude. "No thanks needed. Any decent man would have done the same." "That has not been my experience," Sophia said. "Most men would have looked the other way." He did not have an answer for that, just nodded again and took his purchases. But as he turned to leave, Sophia found herself speaking again. "Mr. Bartlett, if you have a moment, I would like to speak with you privately." Grant hesitated, then nodded. Mr. Hendricks raised an eyebrow but said nothing as Sophia led Grant out the back door of the store into the small yard where deliveries were made. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. There was a scar along his jawline, faint but noticeable. His eyes were gray-blue, the color of storm clouds. "I wanted to ask you not to tell anyone what happened that night," Sophia said. "About my father trying to sell me. If word gets around, it will make things difficult for me here." "People will talk." Grant's expression tightened. "Your father should be the one ashamed, not you." "I know that. But that is not how it works, is it? When something like this happens, people look at the woman and wonder what she did to deserve it." Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, even though the morning was warm. "I am trying to build a new life here, a respectable life. I would appreciate your discretion." "You have it," Grant said immediately. "I do not gossip, and I do not see any reason to spread your business around." He paused, studying her. "Are you safe now? Your father has not caused more trouble?" "I have not seen him since that night. I moved out. I am living above the store now and working for Mr. Hendricks." "Good." Grant put his hat back on. "That is good. You deserve better than what your father was giving you." There was an awkward silence. Sophia wanted to say more, to somehow express the magnitude of what he had done for her, but she did not have the words. Grant seemed equally at a loss. Finally, he tipped his hat to her. "I should get going." "Take care of yourself, Miss Kendrick." "You too, Mr. Bartlett." She watched him walk away, leading a horse loaded with supplies, and felt a strange sense of loss. It was ridiculous she barely knew this man. But he had appeared in her darkest moment and changed everything, and now he was leaving again, probably forever. Cowboys did not stay in one place. They followed the cattle, the work, the money. Life settled into a routine after that. Sophia worked hard at the general store, learning the business and proving her worth to Mr. Hendricks. She made a few friends among the respectable women of Muskogee, though she was always careful about what she revealed of her past. Her father, she heard through gossip, had moved to a smaller room at a different boarding house and was working odd jobs when he was sober enough to stand. She felt guilty for not checking on him, but she also felt angry at him for what he had tried to do to her. The two emotions warred constantly in her heart. It was mid-May when Grant Bartlett returned to Muskogee. Sophia was working behind the counter when he walked in, and her heart did a strange little skip that she tried to ignore. He looked tired, dusty from the trail, but his face lit up with a genuine smile when he saw her. "Miss Kendrick, still working here, I see." "Still working here," she confirmed, smiling back. "How was your drive? Long, hot, dusty, but profitable." He approached the counter. "I need to restock again. Heading out in 2 days for another drive up to Dodge City." They fell into an easy conversation as Sophia helped him select supplies. Grant was surprisingly easy to talk to, with a dry wit that made her laugh and a genuine interest in hearing about her work at the store. When she mentioned that she was learning bookkeeping, he seemed impressed. That is a valuable skill. Not many people can manage numbers the way they need to be managed. I find it soothing, actually. Everything has to balance. There is a rightness to it when the columns match up. Sophia wrapped his purchases in brown paper. "How long will you be gone this time?" 2 months, maybe 3. Depends on how quickly we can move the herd and what the buyers in Dodge are paying." Grant counted out money for his purchases. "Will you still be here when I get back?" The question seemed to carry more weight than its simple words suggested. Sophia met his eyes and saw something there that made her pulse quicken. "I plan to be. I like it here. Mr. Hendricks is a good employer and I have my own space." "Good," Grant said quietly. "That is good." He lingered a bit longer than necessary, and Sophia found herself reluctant to see him go. Finally, Mr. Hendricks called her to help with a customer, and Grant took his leave. But as he reached the door, he turned back. "Miss Kendrick, when I get back from Dodge City, may I call on you?" "Properly, I mean." Sophia's breath caught. "I would like that, Mr. Bartlett." His smile transformed his face, making him look younger and less weathered. "Then I will count the days." After he left, Sophia found herself in a daze. Mr. Hendricks chuckled. "That Bartlett fellow has always been a good man. Honest as they come. If he is interested in you, you could do a lot worse." "I barely know him," Sophia protested, but she was smiling. "Sometimes that is how it works. You just know." Mr. Hendricks went back to his ledger. "He saved you, did he not?" "I heard a bit about what happened, though I never said anything. That creates a bond between people." Sophia wanted to ask how much Mr. Hendricks knew, but she decided against it. Better to let the past stay in the past. Instead, she focused on her work and tried not to count the days until Grant returned, even though that was exactly what she found herself doing. The weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sophia threw herself into her work, reorganizing the entire storeroom and creating a new inventory system that Mr. Hendricks praised effusively. She saved her wages carefully, already thinking about the future in a way she had not allowed herself to before. When she had been living with her father, every day was just about surviving. Now she could actually plan and hope. She saw her father once during those weeks, stumbling down the street at midday, obviously drunk. He saw her too, and their eyes met for a brief, painful moment before he looked away and kept walking. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. James Kendrick had made his choices. She had made hers. It was late July when Grant returned. Sophia was closing up the store for the evening when she saw him riding down the main street, sitting tall in the saddle despite obvious exhaustion. Their eyes met across the distance, and he smiled. She smiled back, her heart hammering in her chest. He came to the store the next morning, freshly bathed and shaved, wearing clean clothes and looking nervous. Mr. Hendricks took one look at him and announced that he needed to run some errands, leaving them alone in the store. Sophia appreciated the older man's tact even as she felt her own nervousness spike. "I have been thinking about you the entire drive," Grant said without preamble. "About how brave you are, how hard you work, about your smile." Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I have been thinking about you too. I know this is quick. I know we barely know each other. But I am not a young man anymore, Miss Kendrick. I am 28 years old, and I have spent most of my life drifting from job to job, never putting down roots. But when I met you, something shifted. I started thinking about what it might be like to have a home, a family." Grant took a deep breath. "I would like to court you properly if you will let me. I want to know everything about you, what you dream about, what makes you laugh, what you want from life." Sophia's throat felt tight with emotion. "I want that too. But you should know, Mr. Bartlett, I come with complications. My father is still here, still drinking. People might talk about my past, about what happened. I do not want to be a burden to you." "You could never be a burden," Grant said firmly. He reached across the counter and took her hand, the touch sending electricity through her. "What your father did is not your shame to carry, and anyone who says otherwise will answer to me." She laughed, a bit tearily. "You cannot fight everyone who gossips. Watch me try." But he was smiling too. "So is that a yes? You will let me court you?" "Yes," Sophia said. "Absolutely yes." The courtship was swift and intense. Grant was in town for 3 weeks before his next drive, and he spent every free moment with Sophia. They walked together in the evenings after the store closed, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16 and heading west to make his own way. She told him about her mother's death and her father's decline, about her dreams of having a stable life and maybe someday a family of her own. Grant was respectful and proper, always mindful of her reputation. But there was heat between them too, a growing attraction that made every accidental touch feel significant. When he finally kissed her, 3 weeks into their courtship, it was in the small yard behind the general store at sunset. He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her feel cherished and precious. "I love you," he said when they finally broke apart. "I know it is fast, but it is true. I love you, Sophia." She felt tears well up, happy ones this time. "I love you too." 2 days before Grant was scheduled to leave for his next cattle drive, he asked her to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of the boarding house where he was staying, watching the stars come out. "I do not have much," he said honestly. "I have saved about $2,000 from drives, and I have a plot of land about 10 miles outside of town that I bought last year. It is not much, just 40 acres, but it is good land. I could build us a house there. Start raising cattle of my own instead of just driving other people's herds." Sophia's heart was racing. "Are you asking me to marry you, Grant Bartlett?" "I am. I know I am not much of a catch. I am gone for months at a time and the work is hard. but I promise I will always provide for you and protect you. I will never let anyone hurt you again." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my mother's. It is the only thing I have of hers. I would be honored if you would wear it." Sophia looked at the ring, touched by the gesture. Then she looked at Grant, at this good, honest man who had saved her and then stayed silent about it to protect her reputation, who had courted her properly and loved her genuinely. The answer was easy. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They married a week later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Muskogee. Mr. Hendricks gave Sophia away, and a few of her friends from town attended. Grant had no family, but some of the cowboys he worked with showed up to support him. Her father was not there, and Sophia tried not to let that hurt. She was marrying a good man who loved her. That was what mattered. Their wedding night was in a hotel room in Muskogee, and Grant was patient and gentle with her. "I love you," he murmured against her skin. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me." Sophia pulled him closer, overwhelmed by the intensity of her feelings. This man had freed her in every sense of the word. He had bought her freedom from Dutch Malone's saloon, and then he had shown her what it meant to be truly loved and valued. "I could never regret this. Never." The next morning, they rode out to Grant's land together. It was beautiful in a raw, untamed way, rolling grassland with a creek running through it and a stand of oak trees on the eastern edge. "I will build our house there," Grant said, pointing to a gentle rise near the trees. "It will give us shade in summer and a windbreak in winter. And you will be able to see anyone coming from a long way off." "It is perfect," Sophia said, meaning it. She could see it in her mind, a house, a barn, cattle grazing in the fields, children playing in the yard, a life built together from nothing, which somehow made it more precious. Grant had to leave 2 days later for a 3-month cattle drive to Abilene. Sophia moved back into her room above the general store and continued working for Mr. Hendricks. It was hard being separated so soon after their wedding, but she understood that the money from this drive would help them build their future. Grant promised to write when he could, and he was true to his word. His letters arrived sporadically, brought by travelers or other cowboys passing through Muskogee, but each one made her heart soar. He wrote about the trail, about difficult river crossings and storms and stubborn cattle. But he also wrote about his dreams for their future, about the house he wanted to build and the life they would create together. Sophia saved every letter, reading them over and over until she had them memorized. She spent her time productively, saving every penny she could and learning everything she could about ranching. She talked to the wives of local ranchers, asking questions about cattle and crops and how to manage a homestead. She bought books on animal husbandry and agriculture, studying them in the evenings by lamplight. When Grant came home, she wanted to be a true partner to him, not just a wife who needed to be taken care of. She also started acquiring things for their future home, practical items like dishes and cooking pots, which she stored in a corner of her small room. Mr. Hendricks helped her, often giving her discounts or throwing in extra items when she made purchases. "You are going to make that Bartlett fellow a fine wife," he said fondly. "He is lucky to have you." It was September when Grant finally returned, bronzed from the sun and leaner than when he had left. Sophia ran into his arms right there on the main street, not caring who saw. He spun her around, laughing, and kissed her soundly. "I missed you so much," he said. "Every day felt like a year." "I missed you too." She pulled back to look at him. "Did the drive go well?" "Very well. I made enough that we can start building the house next month. I already talked to the carpenter, and he can start as soon as I clear the site." Grant's eyes were bright with excitement. "We are going to have a real home, Sophia. Our home." They spent the next 2 months in a flurry of activity. Grant and some hired men cleared the site and began building their house, a modest structure with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a main room, but it was solidly built and designed to last. Sophia helped when she could, though Grant tried to keep her away from the heavy work. "You are already doing enough," he insisted. "Planning everything, buying supplies. Let me do this part." But Sophia could not stand to be idle. She planted a garden near where the house would be, putting in winter vegetables and planning for a larger garden come spring. She worked with the carpenter's wife to sew curtains and bedding. She felt more alive and purposeful than she had in years. The house was finished in November, just before the first real cold set in. It was a proud day when Grant carried her over the threshold of their completed home. They spent their first night there wrapped in blankets in front of the fireplace, christening each room with laughter and love. This was theirs, built with their own hands and their own money. No one could take it from them. Grant took one more cattle drive that winter, a shorter one to supply cattle to the army fort north of Muskogee. He was gone only 6 weeks, and when he returned, he made an announcement. "That is it. No more long drives. I am staying here now, building our ranch. We have enough cattle now to start our own herd, and I can hire out locally for extra money if we need it." Sophia threw her arms around him, relieved beyond measure. She had supported his work because it was necessary, but she hated the long separations. Having him home permanently felt like a dream come true. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Grant was up before dawn every day, tending to the cattle and making improvements to the property. Sophia managed the house and garden, and she also started keeping the ranch books, tracking expenses and income with the same meticulous care she had used at the general store. They made a good team. It was in the spring of 1883 that Sophia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had wanted to be sure before telling Grant. When she finally shared the news, he was overcome with emotion. "A baby," he said wonderingly, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Sophia asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy? Sophia, I am beyond happy. I am," he shook his head, unable to find words, and just pulled her into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me this life, this family." She held him tight, her own eyes wet. "We gave it to each other." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Sophia continued her work around the ranch, though Grant hovered and worried constantly. "You should be resting," he fretted when he found her weeding the garden. "I am pregnant, not dying," she said with amusement. "I feel fine. Better than fine, actually." Their son was born in December of 1883, a healthy baby with Grant's dark hair and Sophia's hazel eyes. They named him Samuel, after Grant's father. Holding their son for the first time, Sophia felt her heart expand with a love she had not known was possible. This tiny person was theirs, created from their love, innocent and perfect. Grant was a devoted father from the start. Sophia would wake in the night to feed Samuel and find Grant already awake, watching them both with an expression of such tenderness that it made her heart ache. "I never thought I would have this," he admitted one night. "A wife, a son, a home. I thought I was going to spend my whole life drifting." "What changed?" Sophia asked, though she thought she knew the answer. You changed everything." Grant reached over to touch Samuel's tiny hand. "That night in the saloon, when I saw what was happening to you, something just snapped into place. I knew I could not walk away. And then when I got to know you, I knew I never wanted to." Sophia leaned against his shoulder. "You saved me that night, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Grant corrected gently. Life on the ranch continued to improve. Their herd grew, and Grant's reputation as an honest rancher spread. They started getting contracts to supply beef to the nearby army fort and to some of the larger towns in the territory. Money was not plentiful, but it was steady, and they were building something real and lasting. Sophia saw her father occasionally in town when she went in for supplies. He looked older each time, more worn down by the whiskey and his choices. Once, when Samuel was about a year old, James Kendrick approached her on the street. "That is my grandson," he said, his voice rough. "Yes," Sophia said quietly. She did not want to be cruel, but she also could not forget what he had done. "He is a fine-looking boy." Her father's hands shook slightly. "You are doing well, I am glad." There was an awkward silence. Finally, Sophia said, "You could do well too, Papa. You could stop drinking, find steady work. It is not too late." But even as she said it, she knew it was not true. James Kendrick was too far gone, too lost in his bottles to find his way back. He shook his head slowly. "Some things are too broken to fix, Sophie, but I am glad you got out. I am glad you found someone good." He walked away before she could respond, and she watched him go with a mixture of sadness and relief. She had grieved for her father years ago, when he had started drinking himself to death. This man was just a ghost of the person he had once been. She did not tell Grant about the encounter. There was no point in worrying him or dredging up the past. Instead, she focused on their growing family and thriving ranch. Samuel was walking now, a bright and curious toddler who followed his father everywhere. Grant was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about the horses and cattle, letting him help with chores. In the spring of 1885, Sophia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace. She had Grant's strong features softened into delicate beauty, and from the start, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to hold her and help care for her. Their house felt full of life and love. Sophia would stand at her kitchen window sometimes, watching Grant play with their children in the yard, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for how far they had come. From that terrible night in Dutch Malone's saloon to this, a thriving ranch, healthy children, a marriage built on genuine love and respect. It felt like a miracle. The years passed in a blur of work and joy. The ranch continued to grow, and they hired a few hands to help with the cattle. Grant built a larger barn and expanded their pastures. Sophia's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and extra to sell in town. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure. In 1887, their third child was born, another son they named Daniel. He was quieter than Samuel had been, more thoughtful, with Sophia's hazel eyes and a serious expression even as a baby. Samuel and Grace adored their new brother, fighting over who got to help with him. It was around this time that word reached them that James Kendrick had died. He had been found in his room at the boarding house, having drunk himself to death sometime in the night. Sophia felt a complicated grief wash over her. She mourned for the father he had been before her mother died, for the man who had once lifted her onto his shoulders and called her his little princess. But she could not mourn for the man he had become, the man who had tried to sell her to pay his whiskey tab. Grant held her while she cried, understanding without her having to explain that her tears were for what might have been rather than what was. "You gave him chances," he reminded her gently. "You tried to help him. Some people just cannot be saved." "I know," Sophia whispered. "I just wish things had been different." They buried James Kendrick in the town cemetery, and Sophia was surprised by how many people attended. Apparently, her father had been well liked in his younger days, before the drinking took over. Several older residents shared stories of his kindness and humor, and Sophia was grateful to hear them. It helped to remember that he had not always been the broken man of his final years. After the funeral, She and Grant stood by the grave for a long moment. "You think he was proud of you?" Grant asked. "Of what you built, I do not know," Sophia said honestly. "I hope so. I hope wherever he is now, he is at peace." They walked back to their wagon hand in hand. Their children were being watched by a neighbor, and Sophia was eager to get home to them. Life was precious and short, and she did not want to waste a moment of it. As the Oklahoma Territory moved toward statehood, Muskogee grew and modernized. Electric lights came to the main street. The railroad expanded, bringing more commerce and more people. Grant and Sophia's ranch became one of the more established operations in the area, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Samuel grew into a strong, capable young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Grace was bright and spirited, with a gift for dealing with horses that amazed everyone. Daniel was the quiet scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of becoming a lawyer someday. In 1895, Sophia gave birth to their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Rose. She was the baby of the family, doted on by everyone, and she grew up fearless and confident because of it. Grant and Sophia were in their early 40s now, no longer young but far from old. They had built something remarkable together, a family, a home, a legacy. Sometimes, usually late at night when the children were asleep and they sat together on their porch watching the stars, they would talk about that night in the Red Dog Saloon, about how a chance encounter had changed both their lives forever. "I was so scared," Sophia admitted one such night. "When I realized what Papa had done, I thought my life was over. And I walked in thinking I was just going to play some cards and get a drink," Grant said. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I thank God every day that I walked through those doors when I did. You ever regret it? The $300, I mean. That was a lot of money." Grant turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Sophia, that $300 was the best investment I ever made. I bought your freedom, yes, but I also found my future. I found you. I would have paid 10 times that amount and considered it a bargain." She leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "I love you, Grant Bartlett. I love you too, Sophia Bartlett. Always have, always will." As they sat there in the comfortable silence of a long marriage, Sophia thought about the younger version of herself, the terrified girl standing behind the bar at the Red Dog Saloon. She wished she could tell that girl that everything was going to be okay, that a stranger with gray-blue eyes and a strong sense of justice was about to walk through the door and change everything. But maybe that girl already knew on some level. Maybe that was why she had called out to Grant that night, asking him why he did it. Some part of her must have recognized that this man was different, that his act of kindness was the beginning of something profound. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county and brought her home to the ranch, building a house on the eastern edge of Grant and Sophia's property. Grace surprised everyone by marrying a horse trainer from Texas and moving away, though she visited often. Daniel went off to study law, fulfilling his childhood dream, and eventually set up practice in Muskogee. Rose was still too young to think about such things, but she kept them all entertained with her boundless energy and imagination. Grant and Sophia became grandparents in 1897 when Samuel and his wife had a son. Holding her first grandchild, Sophia felt the circle of life complete itself in a satisfying way. She thought about her own mother, gone these 20 years, and wished she could have met her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But in another way, she felt her mother's presence in the love and stability she had created for her family. Grant was a wonderful grandfather, patient and playful in a way that delighted his grandchildren. As more grandchildren arrived over the years, he taught them all to ride and rope, passing on the skills that had sustained him through his cowboy days. But he also taught them about honesty and hard work, and standing up for what was right. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Grant surprised Sophia with a gift, a beautiful gold locket engraved with both their initials and the date they married. Inside were tiny photographs of each of their children. "I wanted you to have something to remember this life we have built," he said as he fastened it around her neck. Sophia touched the locket, tears in her eyes. "As if I could ever forget." "Grant, you have given me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more. We gave it to each other," he said, echoing her words from so many years ago. "I was just a drifter before I met you. You gave me a reason to put down roots. You gave me a home." They held each other close, middle-aged now but still deeply in love. The passion of their early days had matured into something even stronger, a partnership built on trust, respect, and genuine affection. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, each other's fears and dreams. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, and they had always emerged stronger on the other side. As Oklahoma moved toward statehood in 1907, Grant and Sophia watched the changes with interest. They had been pioneers in a way, building their lives in a rough territory that was now becoming civilized. Muskogee was a real city now, with schools and churches and businesses. The wild frontier days were fading into history. But the ranch remained, a testament to their hard work and determination. It would pass to their children and grandchildren, a legacy of what two people could build together when they refused to give up. One evening in the spring of 1908, Grant and Sophia took a ride out to the creek that ran through their property. It was something they did occasionally, a way to have some time alone away from the bustle of family life. They sat by the water, listening to it burble over the rocks, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. "You remember what you said to me the night we met?" Grant asked. "After I paid your debt." Sophia thought back, trying to recall exact words from 26 years ago. "I asked you why you did it. And I said it was the right thing to do, but that was not the whole truth." Grant turned to look at her, his gray-blue eyes still clear and bright despite his years. "The truth is, the moment I saw you standing there behind that bar, looking scared but defiant, something in me just knew. I cannot explain it better than that. I knew you were going to be important to me. I knew I could not let Dutch Malone destroy you." Sophia felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I felt it too. I tried to convince myself it was just gratitude, but even that first night, I knew it was more than that. We were lucky," Grant said, "that I walked into that saloon at exactly the right time, that I had the money to pay your debt, that you were brave enough to accept my help and build a new life. So many things could have gone wrong. But they did not," Sophia said firmly. "They did not go wrong because we did not let them. We worked hard. We made good choices. We loved each other and our children. That was not luck, Grant. That was us." He smiled, that slow smile that still made her heart skip. "You are right, it was us. It is us." He pulled her close, and they watched the sunset together, content in the life they had created. The years continued their steady march forward. Grant's hair turned silver, and Sophia's developed streaks of gray that she wore with pride. Their children grew into capable adults with families of their own. Their grandchildren multiplied, filling the ranch with noise and laughter during holidays and visits. The ranch prospered under Samuel's management, with Grant transitioning into an advisory role as his body grew less willing to handle the physical demands of ranching. He and Sophia spent more time traveling, visiting their scattered children and seeing parts of the country they had never explored. but they always came home to their house by the oak trees, to the land they had built together. In 1912, on a warm July evening, Grant and Sophia celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and a community that had watched them build their life together. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears. Samuel talked about his father's integrity and work ethic. Grace spoke about her mother's strength and wisdom. Daniel praised the loving home they had created, and Rose, the youngest, simply said, "You two taught us what real love looks like." After the guests had gone home and the children had retired to their various rooms and houses, Grant and Sophia walked out to their favorite spot by the creek. The moon was full, casting silver light over the water. They sat on a bench Grant had built there years ago, holding hands and listening to the night sounds. 30 years, Sophia marveled. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. "I know what you mean," Grant said. "I look at you and I still see that brave young woman from the Red Dog Saloon. But I also see everything we have been through together, every joy, every struggle, every triumph. You think about that night often, about what almost happened to me." "Sometimes," Grant admitted. "And every time I do, I thank God I was there to stop it. Because if I had not been, if Dutch Malone had gotten his way, none of this would exist. Not our children, not our grandchildren, not our life together. It is unbearable to think about." Sophia squeezed his hand. "But it did not happen that way. You were there. You saved me, and we built this beautiful life together. That is what matters." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the moonlight dance on the water. Finally, Grant spoke again, his voice soft. "You know what the best part is? I would do it all again. Every late night with a sick calf, every drought and struggle, every moment of worry and fear. I would do it all again because it led to this, to us." "So would I," Sophia said. "Every single moment." As they walked back to the house, arm in arm, Sophia thought about the journey they had taken together. From that terrible night when her father sold her to pay his whiskey debt, to this beautiful evening surrounded by family and love, it had been an incredible transformation. Grant had bought her freedom with $300, but what he had really given her was a life, a future, a family. And she had given him the same a reason to stop drifting and start building, a place to call home, a love that had sustained him through 3 decades and would continue to sustain him for however many years they had left. The seasons continued to turn. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall. The ranch changed with the times, adopting new techniques and technologies, but the heart of it remained the same, a family working together, building something that would last. Grant's health began to decline slowly as he reached his mid-60s. Nothing dramatic, just the gradual wearing down of a body that had worked hard for many years. He moved more carefully now, took longer to recover from exertion, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Sophia never wavered. They had been married 35 years when Grant sat Sophia down one evening and spoke seriously. "I want you to know that I have no regrets, not a single one. This life with you has been everything I could have hoped for and more." Sophia felt a chill of fear. "Why are you talking like this?" "Because I am getting older and we need to be realistic. I want you to know that if something happens to me, I am at peace. I have lived a full life. I have loved and been loved. I have children and grandchildren who will carry on our legacy." He took both her hands in his. "But I also want you to promise me that if I go first, you will keep living. You will not just sit here mourning. You will travel, spend time with our children, enjoy the life we built." "Grant, promise me, Sophia. You are strong and capable. You do not need me to survive. I want you to thrive." Through her tears, Sophia promised. But privately, she could not imagine a life without Grant by her side. He had been her partner, her love, her best friend for more than 3 decades. The thought of losing him was unbearable, but fate was kinder than her fears. Grant lived to see his 70th birthday, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. He was slowing down, spending more time in his chair on the porch than working on the ranch, but he was content. Sophia was 62, still active and healthy, and she cherished every day she had with her husband. They had been married 40 years when Grant woke one morning and announced that it was going to be a beautiful day. They should have a picnic by the creek, just the two of them like they used to do. Sophia agreed immediately, delighted by his energy. They packed a basket and walked slowly to their favorite spot, enjoying the spring sunshine. They ate and talked, reminiscing about their life together. Grant spoke about the night they met, about how seeing her had changed the entire trajectory of his existence. Sophia talked about their children and grandchildren, about the legacy they had created. "I have had a good life," Grant said as the afternoon light turned golden. "A better life than I ever expected, and it is all because of you." "And you," Sophia reminded him. "We did this together, remember?" Grant smiled and squeezed her hand. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." They stayed by the creek until sunset, watching the sky turn colors. When they finally walked back to the house, Grant was tired but happy. He fell asleep that night in Sophia's arms, and he did not wake up. He passed peacefully in the night, his heart simply stopping after 7 decades of beating faithfully. Sophia's grief was profound but not bitter. They had known this day would come eventually. Grant had lived a full life and had died peacefully, without pain or suffering. At his funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives he had touched, fellow ranchers, cowboys he had worked with, neighbors he had helped, children and grandchildren who adored him. Samuel gave the eulogy, speaking about his father's integrity, his kindness, his unwavering commitment to family. "My father was not a perfect man," Samuel said, "but he was a good man. He saw someone in trouble and he helped. He made a commitment and he kept it. He loved my mother with everything he had for 40 years. That is the legacy he leaves us, not wealth or land, but the example of how to live with honor and love." After the funeral, Sophia walked out to the grave one last time alone. She stood there in the fading light, remembering everything. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for that night in the saloon. Thank you for buying my freedom. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for 40 beautiful years. I will miss you every day for the rest of my life." She kept her promise to Grant. She did not just sit and mourn. She traveled to see Grace in Texas, spent months at a time with Daniel and his family in town, helped Samuel and his wife with the ranch. She watched her great-grandchildren grow and told them stories about their great-grandfather, about the cowboy who had saved her and then loved her. Sophia lived to be 84 years old, sharp and clear-minded until the end. She spent her final years in a comfortable room in Samuel's house, surrounded by family. And when she died peacefully in her sleep on a warm summer night in 1926, her children found a letter she had written years before, to be read after her passing. In it, she told the story of how she had met Grant, the full story that few people knew. She wrote about being sold to pay her father's whiskey debt, about Grant walking into the Red Dog Saloon at exactly the right moment, and paying $300 for her freedom. She wrote about his silence, about how he had protected her reputation even though it meant no one knew the full extent of his heroism. And she wrote about their love, about how that one act of compassion had blossomed into 40 years of partnership and joy. "I want you all to know this story," she wrote, "because it shows what one person can do when they choose kindness over indifference. Your grandfather saw someone in trouble and he helped, not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. And from that single act of decency came all of this: our family, our ranch, our legacy. Never underestimate the power of choosing to help. Never doubt that one person can change the world, or at least change one person's world completely. Your grandfather changed mine, and I spent 40 years grateful for it. I hope you will all carry that lesson forward into your own lives. The letter was framed and hung in the ranch house, where it remained for generations. And the story of Grant and Sophia was told and retold, becoming part of the family lore. The cowboy who bought a woman's freedom in a saloon and then fell in love with her. The woman who was brave enough to accept help and build a new life. The love that grew from an act of kindness and sustained two people through 4 decades. Their graves stood side by side in the Muskogee Cemetery, under a large oak tree. The headstones were simple but elegant, listing their names and dates. But on Sophia's stone, beneath her dates, was an additional inscription that she had requested years before. She was freed by kindness and lived by love. And on Grant's, he saw someone in trouble and he helped. It was a simple epitaph for an extraordinary life. But it captured the essence of who they were and what they had meant to each other. Two people brought together by chance and circumstance, who had chosen to build something beautiful from a moment of crisis. Their love story began in the worst possible way, with betrayal and desperation and fear. But it ended in the best possible way, with decades of happiness. A family that would carry on their legacy, and a love that lasted literally until death did them part, and even beyond, in memory and story. The ranch continued to operate, passed down through the generations. The house by the oak trees still stood, modernized but recognizable. And every so often, when the wind blew just right, it was almost possible to imagine two figures sitting on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, still together after all these years. Because some loves are strong enough to transcend time and death. Some loves start in the darkest moments and grow into something that lights up the world. And some loves begin when a cowboy walks into a saloon at exactly the right moment, sees a woman in trouble, and decides to help. $300 to buy her freedom. A lifetime of silence to protect her reputation, and 40 years of love that proved that sometimes the best things in life begin when someone simply chooses to do the right thing.